Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so we're going to continue now with the discussion of Sutta number 117. This is the Discourse on the Great 40, the Mahacattarisaka Sutta. Okay, just to review what we covered the last time, the Buddha begins the sutta by announcing that he's going to teach what is called the Noble Right concentration with its supports and its requisites. Noble Right concentration, this is Arya Sama Samadhi. Then the supports and requisites of Noble Right concentration are the other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, that is, from right view and right mindfulness. And the Noble Right concentration is, we're on page 934, the Noble Right concentration is unification of mind equipped with these 7 factors. So these 7 factors, the other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, are the supports and requisites for Noble Right concentration, which is unification or one-pointedness of mind. So in other words, this sutta is going to be expounding the Noble Eightfold Path, but not in the usual sequential manner, but rather it's taking Noble Right concentration, as you could say, the core, the peak, the essence of the Noble Path, as though the Noble Right concentration is the sun, and the other 7 factors are like the planets revolving around the sun. Okay, so then in analyzing the other factors that support and accompany right concentration, the Buddha starts with right view. And first he distinguishes right view from wrong view being the view that denies karmic causation and which denies the value of doing good deeds and so forth. But then he introduces, and this is quite unique to this sutta, a distinction between 2 kinds of right view. He says that right view is twofold. There's the right view which is accompanied by or connected with the asavas, with the fundamental defilements, which partakes of merit and ripens in the acquisitions. That is, it leads back into new birth, into new existence, back into samsara, probably in a favorable condition because it's a right view, But this is a right view, which is, you could say, it's the right view of the mundane path of practice. The right view that leads to the accumulation of merit and to a fortunate rebirth in the future. But it's not the right view that leads to liberation. The right view that leads to liberation is called the right view that is noble, taintless, supermundane, a factor of the path. Again, these are words or expressions which are almost, let's say that they're uniquely used in this sutta to describe a factor of the path. And so we seem to be, the sutta is making a distinction between two kinds of path. There's the mundane, meritorious path and the world-transcending, liberating path. Okay, so then, having set up this distinction among the path factors, dividing them by way of these two kinds of paths, then the Buddha defines the right view that's connected with the taints, partaking of merit, leading to a fortunate rebirth, as the view that affirms karmic causation, that affirms the value or the virtue of doing good, wholesome deeds. And then when we come to the right view that's called noble, taintless, supermundane, a factor of the path, as I said last time, the content of that view is not explicit, it's not made explicit, but rather the view, this world-transcending right view, is explained simply by enumerating a number of terms which are used throughout the suttas to represent wisdom. And so we have, what is this world-transcending right view? It's wisdom, the faculty of wisdom, the power of wisdom, the investigation of states enlightenment factor, the path factor of right view in the mind that is noble, the mind that's taintless, the mind that possesses the noble path, and so on. So that is the world transcending right view. And then we have the right effort is brought in as the effort to abandon wrong view and to acquire right view. And right mindfulness comes in insofar as with mindfulness one abandons wrong view, and with mindfulness one acquires right view. Okay, so then the Buddha says that these three states, that is the preliminary right view, the right effort, and right mindfulness, circle around right view. Okay, so that is just a recapitulation of what we covered last time. Now we'll go on to the new material. And here it gets really interesting and a little bit surprising. Okay, so now the Buddha takes up the next factor of the path in the normal sequence. This is Samma Sankappa, which is right intention. And he begins again by bringing in right view, because right view is essential to developing every factor of the Eightfold Path. And that is because right view, in one of its functions, has the task of distinguishing between what is right and what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, what is beneficial, what is harmful. So with respect to intention, sankappa, the Buddha says, right view again comes first. And how does right view come first? One understands wrong intention as wrong intention, and right intention as right intention. That is one's right view. I mean, this is quite, it seems almost tautological, self-evident, but it's really quite significant. Because, without the clarity of presentation that we find in the Buddha's teaching, we can think that what is really a wrong intention is right intention. Like nowadays, people think, the way to happiness is to indulge your sensual desires. And so they say, eat, drink, and merry. Eat, drink, and be merry. Dance and sing and enjoy yourself while you can. Time is fleeting. You're young, healthy, vigorous. Enjoy life while you can. That's making the right use of your life. And so this is, in a way, taking wrong intention, the intention of sensual indulgence, to be right intention. Or people also say that if somebody is mean to you, nasty to you, hit him, punch him. Knock him down. Don't take nonsense from him. You could show that yours is just as strong as he is. And if somebody harms you, get back at him, retaliate. So this is, again, taking wrong intention to be right intention. And so if you have right view, then you know when you're being bombarded with messages telling you to do what is wrong, then you know that this is wrong. And you know what you have to do that's right. So to have right view means that you're able to distinguish not only when other people tell you what to do, but when the thoughts come into your mind, I should do this, let me enjoy myself. They're all getting rich, they're all enjoying themselves. Why am I staying quietly at home, depriving myself of the pleasures of life, just because this stupid book tells me refrain from sensual misconduct? And so then the voice will arise saying, hey, those thoughts are wrong intention. The thought comes, let me strike back at that nasty guy who always speaks to me in a rather crude way at work. I'm always trying to be so polite to him. I don't have to take that nonsense anymore. I could show him that I'm the tough guy in the block, right? So then when that thought comes, then you realize this is a wrong intention, and you dismiss it. Okay, so you understand right and wrong intention and right intention, each for what they are. Then what is wrong intention? This is the usual explanation. It's the intention or the motivation of indulging in sensual desire, the intention of ill will, that's anger or hatred or resentment, and then the intention, here it's translated as cruelty, but maybe better, the intention of harmfulness, the intention of wanting to inflict harm and suffering on others. Sometimes the question comes up, what is the difference between the intention of ill will and the intention of harming? Anybody have any ideas about that? They seem to be quite similar. You know?
Ill will does not necessarily mean that I'm thinking ill will does not necessarily mean that it is my intention to harm, but I wish that ill will from another source occurs.
Or that that from some other source harm will come to that
Yes.
person. That seems to be the difference. What's interesting is that, like I haven't seen in the commentaries, I don't think I've seen them bring up explicitly a discussion of the difference between ill will and the intention of harming. They always seem to almost to assume that it's self-evident. But it seems that whenever there's the intention of harming, that there's ill will is behind it. But maybe the intention of harming has such a specific character of its own that it's sort of been separated off from ill will and made a separate kind of wrong intention. And also the idea of non-harming becomes quite prominent throughout the different schools of Indian thought. In Pali, non-harming is called avihingsa. But the Jains, you see the V here is just an intensification. So the Jains call it ahimsa. And that word was taken over by Gandhi, so Gandhi called one aspect of his philosophy the philosophy of ahimsa. And then that was sort of taken over by, or adopted by Martin Luther King. Well, maybe he was the original one, but he adopted the expression, the philosophy of nonviolence. And so nonviolence then is sort of a representation in English of the term ahimsa, which comes from Jainism, a school that was contemporary with the Buddha. And the Buddha expressed the same idea as avihimsa, non-harming. Okay, so we have these three types of wrong intention. And now this is the interesting passage. Okay, the Buddha says, what is right intention? And again, he says right intention is twofold. There is the right intention that is tainted, that creates merit, that ripens in the acquisitions. That means that it leads back to a new set, it leads back to rebirth. But as right intention, it will lead to a fortunate or happy rebirth. And then there is right intention that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path. Then the Buddha, now he's going to define each of these two expressions. So he says, what is the right intention that is connected with the taints, that creates merit, that leads to a fortunate rebirth? It's the intention of renunciation, or the giving up of sensual desires, the intention of non-ill will, and the intention of non-cruelty, or maybe more accurately, the intention of non-harming. So that is the right intention that's affected by, that's connected with the taints and so on. Now what makes this interesting is that if we look at the sutta, another sutta, which explains the Noble Eightfold Path as the way to the cessation of suffering, and then we look at the definition of the path factors, we'll see that right intention is defined exactly in this way. For example, Sutta number 141. This is on page 1100. We'll go back to 1099, the very bottom of 1099. And this is actually Venerable Sariputta speaking, but elsewhere we find these same definitions coming from the Buddha. He says, what, friends, is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering? It's the Noble Eightfold Path, right view, and so on. Then in section 25, and what is right intention? It's the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will. Let's make this a little more positive. The intention of goodwill, and the intention of non-harming or harmlessness. So that is the right intention, which belongs to the Noble Eightfold Path, the path leading to the end of suffering, the liberating path, the path leading to Nibbana. But here, in Sutta number 117, it seems almost as if that definition of right intention has been you want to call it demoted, dropped down to part of the mundane path, the path leading to a fortunate rebirth. And then we find in the book of the Abhidharma, this is the second book of the Abhidharma called the Vibhanga, the book of analysis, in the chapter on the path constituents. This is chapter 11. We find that this book makes a distinction between two ways of treating or analyzing the Noble Eightfold Path. It distinguishes between the method of the suttas and the method of the Abhidharma. And then we look at the analysis according to the suttas, then we find what is right thought, or this is right intention, the intention associated with renunciation, the intention associated with non-ill will, the intention associated with non-cruelty. This is called right intention according to the sutta method of analysis. Actually, I got ahead of myself, because to complete the discussion, we have to go back to the sutta, Mahacattarisaka Sutta. And what monks, number 14, what monks is right intention that is noble, taintless, supermundane, a factor of the path? And now we find the right intention explained not in terms of its actual contents, but rather it's explained by way of the mental factor that is sort of responsible for right intention. So what is this right intention? It's the thinking, the thought, the intention, the mental application, mental fixity, the directing of mind, the verbal formation in one whose mind is noble, whose mind is taintless, who possesses the noble path and is developing the noble path. That is the right intention that is noble, a factor of the path. So this way of explanation, by treating what was originally a practical method of definition, typical of the suttas, instead treating it by way of a series of synonyms that specify that factor as a particular mental factor. This is the typical Abhidharma mode of analysis. So we see, at least it's my opinion, but also the opinion of more accomplished academic scholars, that this text has been somewhat reworked, either because the Abhidharma had already developed to some extent, and some styles of thinking distinctive of the Abhidharma were being transposed back into the sutta, which originally could have been simpler, simply following the ordinary sutta style of explanation. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that the Abhidharma hadn't yet really crystallized or taken shape, but discussions were going on in the Sangha along the lines that were to form the Abhidhamma, and then some of those ideas, themes of the methods of analysis that were emerging in the discussions amongst the monks were then brought back into the sutta as a way of giving a more precise explanation of the path factors. So just a moment ago, I read out for you how right intention is defined in the Abhidhamma according to the sutta method of analysis. But then the second subdivision of this chapter deals with the Abhidhamma method of analysis. And here we find, okay, what is the Eightfold Path? Again, right view, right thought, to right concentration. Then what is right intention? It is that which is thinking, thought, intention, the application of the mind, the focusing of the mind, the directing of the mind, the path constituent, the factor included in the path. That is called right intention. So that you could see that they're almost identical. And so in this sutta, the Mahacattarisaka Sutta, we see that material from the Abhidhamma, or at least the method of treatment distinctive of the Abhidhamma, has been brought in to clarify the nature of right thought. And one thing that might be a little bit puzzling in this definition, well, first let me explain why right intention is explained in terms of thought, thinking, and so on. Okay, for right intention, the sutta uses the term sama sankappa. But elsewhere in the suttas, we find the same types of wrong thought, or the same types of wrong intention and right intention represented by another word, vitakka. And so sankappa and vitakka are synonymous terms, which is why sometimes, and some translators will render the second factor of the path as right thought. Except for me, I find the problem with right thought is that it seems to me that the English word thought can comprise both right view and right intention. Whereas what is meant by sankappa, you could see from the explanation in terms of renunciation, goodwill, and non-harming, it's more the motivational or purposive aspect of thought rather than the intellectual, conceptual aspect of thought. And so that's why we have what is right intention, thinking, thought, intention, then mental application. That's because sankappa, intention, is seen to have the function of directing the mind to the object or applying the mind onto its object. And then what's a little bit puzzling is the expression verbal formation. The reason why verbal formation is used here, this is based or related to a statement made in another sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. This is sutta number 44. The Chula Vedalla Sutta on page 399, where there's a bhikkhuni named Dhammadina. She is answering questions. And the layman who's questioning her says, this is in section 15 on that page. He says, why are applied thought and sustained thought called the verbal formation? Here, applied thought is vitakka. So why is vitakka called the verbal formation? And then she explains, first one uses applied thought and sustained thought, and afterwards one breaks out into speech. And so before you're speaking, even if it's very quickly, almost momentarily, thoughts arise in the mind. And so when you speak, you're giving expression to the thoughts that have arisen in the mind. If you didn't formulate thoughts and just spoke, then just nonsense would come out, like a baby crying, wah, 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 wah. Okay, and now this is a difference between the right intention, which pertains to the mundane path, and the world-transcending right intention. The mundane right intention is this faculty of thought, this power of thought, vitakka, which is accompanied by a certain purpose. The three purposes that are enumerated here: the purpose of renunciation, which doesn't mean that one has to, give up the household life to become a monk or nun, but it means giving up, letting go of sensual desires. So even when one is practicing generosity, say making a donation to a worthy cause, offering food to a hungry person, or even giving gifts to one's friends and family, without the intention of getting a gift in return, one is giving up or letting go of attachment in some form. So that is the intention of renunciation. Or maybe if renunciation sounds too strong, we could say the intention of letting go, the intention of giving up. And then whenever one is either being patient with a person who is provoking you, or extending thoughts of kindness and goodwill to anyone, then you're developing, bringing into being the intention of goodwill, which is almost synonymous with metta, loving kindness. And then whenever you have some kind of impulse to retaliate against somebody, to create misery for somebody, to inflict either physical harm or psychological harm on others, and you restrain that intention and instead arouse the intention to treat them well, to treat them politely, cordially, or if they're in suffering, to help them out of their suffering, then you're developing the intention of harmlessness or non-cruelty. So that is the right intention, which is here said to be part of the mundane path. So what is the world-transcending right intention? Okay, now looking at this from the perspective of the Abhidharma, when a person develops insight, wisdom, there is the intention, which is the thought, power of thought, directing the mind to the object of insight. The thought which is repeatedly bringing, or the direction of the mind to the object of insight. This, we could say, is the right thought or right intention on the preliminary phase of the Noble Path. But when the sequence of insight knowledges comes to its culmination, then what occurs is the experience which is called the breakthrough to the Dharma, or the attainment of the world-transcending path. And that is the single moment of awakening, or maybe call it the flash of the flash of enlightenment. And what happens then is that the mind has turned away from all conditioned phenomena, from everything included in the five aggregates, and it's, in a sense, you could say it's jumped out upon nibbana, or it's penetrated right through conditioned phenomena to the unconditioned, to nibbana. And that state of mind, that moment of consciousness, consists of a whole cluster of mental factors. And among those mental factors, there will be 8 factors which are exercising especially prominent roles. And those will be the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. And amongst those 8 factors, one of them will be right intention, or one of those factors will be the factor of thought, vitakka. And when that thought, directed thought, is taking nibbana as the object of realization, then that thought becomes the world-transcending or taintless right intention. And that right intention has the function of cutting off or reducing wrong intention. In our ordinary day-to-day life, wrong intentions arise, as students of the Dharma. We know these wrong intentions are wrong, and so we make the effort to overcome them. We try to oppose them with right intention. And as we go on cultivating right intention, we'll find that the task becomes easier, a little by little easier. But the wrong intention is always there, just below the surface. And when we're not completely diligent and heedful, then the wrong thoughts, wrong intentions start coming up to the surface. But the world-transcending right intention has the function of cutting off permanently the wrong thoughts. It doesn't do this all at once, but in stages. So the first breakthrough, that of stream entry, cuts off the grossest type of wrong intentions. Then the next breakthrough to the stage of once returner cuts off the wrong intentions, which are a little subtler. Then the next breakthrough to the stage of, actually it would seem that the stage of non-returner would permanently cut off the intention of ill will and the intention of harming or cruelty, and even the intention of enjoying sensual desires. But there'll still be, even for the non-returner, still the subtle intention of desire to experience the delights of some of the higher celestial realms. But then with the breakthrough to arahatship, then even the subtlest wrong intention of desire will be cut off permanently. Okay, so then the text says that one makes the effort to abandon wrong intention and to acquire right intention. That is the right effort. And then one goes about this task, abandoning wrong intention and acquiring right intention. One goes about it with mindfulness. So that is one's right mindfulness. And so we have these three states that run and circle around right intention. That is the preliminary right view, which distinguishes wrong view, the preliminary right view, which distinguishes wrong intention and right intention, the right effort to abandon the wrong, to acquire the right intention, and the mindfulness, the right mindfulness, with which one abandons wrong intention and acquires right intention. Okay, maybe at this point I should ask whether there's any questions. Oh, Barbara, go ahead.
Two paths, rather than a path like the mundane path leading into the world transcending path.
You know, why is this explained by making the sharp distinction between two paths,
yes,
rather than the mundane path leading up to the world?
Yes.
Really, that is actually the way it works, is that looking at the path from what I would call a strictly sutta standpoint, one would say that it's the preliminary practice of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, which are, the preliminary practice is a mundane path, but that will culminate in the world transcending path. So your question makes a good point, which is actually true and valid. But I think that this sutta, the way it's come down, and as I said, it seems to have come down in this way because it's absorbed material from the emerging Abhidhamma way of thinking. So I think it's explained in this way just to distinguish between the two paths. But I think definitely we have to understand that the mundane path leads to and merges into the world transcending path. And maybe that is why, especially maybe why right mindfulness is not taken up for separate analysis Because if one were to take right mindfulness for analysis, then one would have to take, the stock formula on the 4 foundations of